This is the Canadian Foreign Policy Hour, and I am
How's it going, everyone? Hope everyone is doing well.
Eve Engler. Um, the Canadian Foreign Policy Hour is a critical look at Canada's role abroad, and we are at about 110, 112, 115 or something like that sessions, weekly look every Monday night. I'm coming to you from Georgiage, which has long been a meeting place of various First Nations, otherwise known as Montreal. And I have to be out at 7, so I'm going to try to keep this a little bit brief than usual, so we can have some comments and questions. First thing, there's a video, a 7-minute video from about indigenous Zapotec communities in Oaxaca that have been challenging Vancouver-based Fortuna silver mine and defending their land, and how much ecological damage the Canadian company is causing in Oaxaca, a largely indigenous part of southern Mexico that people can take a look at. There on Haiti, there's finally Ariel Henry actually resigned. He resigned from Los Angeles, of all places, because he's not been allowed back in the country now for about, I guess, close to 2 months. And the reports are, so there's a transitional council, but this individual, Patrick Boisvert, who was part of Ariel Henry's cabinet, has been made interim prime minister, and seems to be ruling with this transitional council that has 7 voting members, 9 members in total. It's unclear to me why someone from Henry's cabinet would be made the interim prime minister. I haven't seen this properly explained. It seems like a sort of power grab or a continuation, I'd maybe say, of the PHTK political party that's been dominating for 13 years or so. But there is this transition council. This new leader 3 or 4 days ago was sort of sworn in this secret affair, I believe at a hotel in Port-au-Prince, because they don't have much control. Obviously, the gangs have lots of power, and the gangs are not accepting this. They're saying they should have a seat at the table, and so it's a bit unclear where this is all going. The reports are that the Kenyan police will be there before May 23rd, Kenyan-led mission, when the Kenyan president will be in Washington, D.C. First time an African leader has been invited to D.C. apparently since 2008. The National, CBC News, The National had 2 nights ago had a clip, a report from Jamaica, where Canadian troops are training Jamaican and Barbados, and I think there's a third country forces to participate in this mission to Haiti. And what was interesting about this national report was how it was very open. This was like warfare. They weren't like, it's kind of been framed as like a policing mission, but this national report, CBC national report, was very clear this was going to be like an armed kind of mission, and the Canadians were training these soldiers for, to prepare them for fighting, right? Some killing in the urban area. So that's kind of an interesting development. It makes sense. I think the mission here would be to go in and dislodge the gangs and ensure that Boisvert is, in charge. And Boisvert is still very connected to the North American elite power structure within Haiti. So that will be things are moving forward on Haiti file, but it's going to be interesting to see where that goes. There was a Wall Street Journal article. This is not about Canada, but I thought it's worth mentioning because it's so sort of stunning, the pullout fact. There was on Saturday, a Wall Street Journal book review of this book about the CIA and Cuba. And in this book, this article says that the book claims that the CIA station in Miami, at its high point after the Cuban Revolution, and amidst their effort to assassinate and oust Castro, the CIA station in Miami, which was basically, I think, before the Cuban Revolution, they said it was like one person working there or something like that. It was actually at one point the biggest employer in Miami. They had so many Cuban exiles, different Cuban groups on their payroll to try to invade Haiti, or it's not Haiti, Cuba, to invade Cuba or overthrow Castro, and actually became the biggest employer in the city for some period of time. On a different note, the Hill Times had this kind of throwaway line in their daily Monday to Friday update that I get emails sent out, and it just said, Canada is, of course, on the receiving end of aggressive foreign influence operations from China and India, both of which lean on members of their diaspora in Canada to exert influence here on their behalf. It's just like put in the article, this is like, or this email, daily email, there's a throwaway line that is completely loaded, but this is what's being sent to the Ottawa kind of official bubble. That's what Hill Times is focused on. And but this is where it's at, right? It's all confirmed that the Chinese government has a, quote, aggressive foreign influence operations, which lean on members of the diaspora in Canada to exert influence here on their behalf. I mean, that puts Chinese, and for that matter, the Indian communities in Canada under a serious kind of target on their back. The New York Times online had this kind of video montage of American military operations like surrounding China. And it said, a new Pacific arsenal to counter China with missiles, submarines, and alliances. President Biden administration has built a presence in the region to rein in Beijing's expansionist goals. So as it's showing this video of US bases all surrounding China, these new alliances all focused on China, it's of course all about Beijing's expansionist goals, right? Not US expansionist goals, but Beijing's expansionist goals. And this is what, of course, Canada is contributing to when it sends naval vessels, spy planes based in Okinawa in Japan to target China, which Canada is doing more of and being increasingly open about this. The Economist published a piece titled, Who's the Big Boss of the Global South? And it was kind of an interesting piece. It's based upon a supposed study to try to quantify what countries have the most influence with the global South. And its conclusion, and it has different factors, and the article didn't really get into all the factors that went into the studies, diplomatic, financial, military, etc., all the criteria that they used, but it kind of delves into some of it. And what it concludes, America has been the country with the most influence over the G77 since 1970s. Its influence capacity has remained more or less constant since then, while Britain and France have significantly weakened. China, since 2000, has significantly increased its influence with the G7, the global South, the sort of 130, I think they list 130 countries that are not part of NATO and part of G7 and part of what European Union, etc. But the US is still the most influential. China is now number 2. And they say that China, they put France as the 3rd most influential, but that China has 3 times more countries that they're the major influencer with than either France or Britain. and India and the UAE are far down past China and obviously U.S., China, France, Britain. That basically makes sense to me. I think that kind of fits my understanding of global power, which is really important. So the U.S. is still not just with NATO and European countries, but and Canada for that matter, but the U.S. is still the dominant force even in the global South. China hasn't actually dislodged the U.S. As influence even among the global South, and I think that basically fits my understanding of global geopolitical power. The jurist Pitasana, who did this very good series on Canadian foreign policy, docu-series, Canadian foreign policy, he did a big interview, did this big long interview. He writes for the Jurist, and maybe 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, we did this interview, like hour-and-a-half interview, and he's written a bunch for them. They refuse to publish it. Kind of an interesting, they basically say that it's too opinionated and it's not legal enough. And in this interview, one of the things that Pitasana wanted to do, he prodded me into making the case for why, as Chomsky has made with the U.S., that every U.S. president could be brought before a Nuremberg tribunal by the principles of the Nuremberg tribunal, could be found to be a war criminal. And he basically we went through that with Canadian leaders and detailed how they could be arguably responsible for war crimes against humanity. But they refused to publish the interview, which is maybe not too surprising. The National Post, I think it's Ibbotson, very right-wing fellow in the National Post. He published a piece titled "The F-35 Sham: How Canada's military-industrial complex made sure Ottawa bought its preferred fighter jet." And the basic point in the piece is that the military, more than 10 years ago, I guess even back to I think 2008, they decided that they wanted the F-35. The F-35 was going to be it. And he shows that they basically bided their time, waited. There was political opposition. They had the whole sole source contract. They tried to get Harper to do that. Then there was a big political pushback. But simultaneously, they maintained, they extended a base, an Air Force runway. But the only reason that would have made any sense for extending the Air Force runway was for the F-35, because other fighter jets didn't need the extended land. And he basically just shows how they, I guess, subverted the political structure to ensure that the F-35 was selected, and there really wasn't a competition, despite the Trudeau government claiming there was a competition. There really wasn't a competition, and he shows how the European, the Swedish company didn't really even compete, even though there was ostensibly some of that taking place. And that's all part of this, huge military spending increase that we're doing. And there's a couple of reports came out this week about that's happening all around the world, right? Military spending is up to 35-year high, fueled by Ukraine war, according to one headline. And I think it's up to 2.4 trillion, up about like 7% year over year. And they just go through all the different places in the world. Just military spending is going up everywhere. That's, of course, going up here in Canada. The British Prime Minister announced big increase in military spending. It's insane. It's madness that with the serious problems around the climate crisis specifically, that we are all collectively spending more on the ability to kill each other. But that's the political system. And starting sometime, I don't know exactly when, but in early May, there's going to be the Across Canada onto Ottawa Peace Caravan. probably people are familiar with this. I think it begins in Vancouver. I think one coming from the East Coast, one coming from the West Coast, and they're going to converge in Ottawa at the CANSEC Arms Fair and the effort to shut down the CANSEC Arms Fair, which I think last year was a pretty good. I didn't go, but it was a pretty good mobilization, my understanding. And the expectation is this year it's going to be a bigger mobilization, especially with the Palestine solidarity milieu in Ottawa mobilizing around that. And so the onto Ottawa Peace Caravan, obviously playing off the onto Ottawa Trek during World War II. No, during World War. Sorry, I don't actually know when. No, it was right after World War I. Oh, I don't know. I'm totally forgetting when that for unemployed people, then they got attacked in Regina. But anyway, so there's going to be during the Great Depression, just before World War II. That makes sense. So there will be this mobilization, and people should pay attention to that. Now, on the Ukraine file, there was a big piece in the Gazette. It's kind of weird because the Montreal Gazette doesn't really publish anything about international affairs anymore. They just take stuff from the National Post. But they had a big, long piece principally about a number 3 Quebecers who've been killed in Ukraine. And it was titled "Canadians Who Made the Extra Ultimate Sacrifice in Ukraine." And they were 10th and 11th Canadians who died, been killed recently, according to Global Affairs. And there's nothing particularly illuminating in this story, but just remembering that now we are 11 Canadians have been killed. The story says that the numbers is unclear how many Canadians are fighting. They say there's still 100 Canadians fighting, and it was probably exaggerated how many were fighting at the high point. And the story mostly kind of about how rotten war is and how rotten the situation is for people fighting in Ukraine. One of the things in that's coming up with in this big, huge U.S. Military package, 60 billion plus, not just military, but mostly military package for Ukraine that has been passed, is that apparently the Americans basically got an agreement that the Ukrainian government would expand the conscription, forced joining the military. And that so the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for European Eurasian Affairs said that the country's mobilization efforts were every bit as critical to stabilizing the front as the artillery, as the weaponry the Americans were providing, right? And so when you think about that big picture, go back to the big concept of fight to the last Ukrainian, the Americans are basically saying, we're going to give you a bunch of new weapons, but you got to make sure to get a bunch of men who don't want to fight into the military to do the fighting and fight to the last Ukrainian. And the University of Ottawa professor Kaczynowski has more videos, just seeing some of them today, from Odessa of these people being forced. They're getting rounded up. There's all these stories about these different apps that help people avoid where they're trying to catch people to check their papers to if they're supposed to be joining the military, and how the different things that Ukrainians are doing to avoid being forced into fighting. It's all pretty grim, but that's what it is. There was also a story about how the Americans secretly provided the Ukrainians with these long-range ATACMS missiles, which I think 190 miles, or I guess around 300 kilometers they can fire, and they've been hitting into pretty deep into Crimea, different, I think even into Russia in the east, and David Swanson from World Beyond War pointed this out, which I noticed myself, is that so there was all this thing about how the Americans need to give all this weaponry, and it's all about the American weaponry. If you just give American weaponry, the front will stabilize. And this was like, weeks and weeks of pushing this kind of narrative. And then like immediately once the weaponry was accepted, once it's gone through, immediately they started saying, well, the weaponry is not going to be enough, right? It's not going to be enough to stop Russia's advance. And as he posted on Twitter, what was it, about 6 or 7 seconds after they got the weapons for Ukraine, that they started allowing reports on how those weapons would just produce more slaughter and not victory, right? And so it's like all this push, the weapons get agreed, and then it's like, wow, this isn't going to be enough for victory. And as he puts it, the newspapers don't frame it like that, but that's what it would be, more slaughter. The New York Times published a piece about what they call the pit, and it's a U.S. base in the heart of Europe. I think it's 1,000 kilometers from Ukraine, that is the center of the intelligence gathering effort, and brings together all these new technologies to target Russian forces. American officials rarely discuss its existence, in part because of security concerns, but mostly because the operation raises questions about how deeply involved the United States is in the day-to-day business of finding and killing Russian troops. We knew this, right? It's the most important part, not the weapons. I mean, that's important. The most important part is the intelligence that the US and NATO have been providing to Ukrainians on Russian military positions, on Russian affairs. That's been central to the Ukraine's ability to basically withstand. I mean, they're losing, but they would have been able to withstand for 2 plus years, to a significant extent, Russia's much more substantive military capacities. And so it's the intelligence that's the central element in helping out Ukraine. And Canada's been providing a whole bunch of that. And I guarantee you, there are Canadian intelligence officers that are at the quote pit U.S. base. And that also surprise me if Canadian military intelligence is actually a big player there. On the question of Palestine, the Globe had a piece where they point out, this is I think last Monday, where they said that 9 of 10 world's hungriest people find as catastrophic famine are in Gaza. So in the worst category of hunger. Now, I think things have improved a little bit over the past couple of weeks. So that's probably the famine is diminishing in Gaza. It's not gone. There's still obviously huge questions, and I guarantee you there are hundreds, probably thousands of people, kids, babies that have died or are going to die because of health consequences of lack of food over the past multiple months, and those won't be counted in the actual kill category. There's also a report about the obviously there's just been killings every week. It's not the toll is not quite as bad as previous weeks, previous months, but still lots of killings. I think Al Jazeera is reporting 25, mostly from one family, just last 24 hours or so. But one story says the Gaza's 37 million tons of bomb-filled debris would take 14 years to clear. So if everything just ended tomorrow, 14 years to clear it. Now, one New York Times story talked about this whole plan for reconstruction. It seems like a very fanciful plan, and they kind of admit that in the story. But part of the plan is using all the debris as a pier. Is not exactly clear to me what they meant, but putting it in the ocean and using it. So repurposing, because they realize there's all this debris, so you got to make lemons out of lemonade kind of situation. So there's people thinking about this, but we're still far from the end of what's going to come. There's also the ecological question, which people don't get much, don't talk about. I published a piece about Steven Guilbeault, something I actually had worked on weeks and weeks ago, and I just kind of got lost in the shuffle. And I kind of updated it about this campaign against Steven Guilbeault by the group here in where I live. Guilbeault's my MP, to target him for his position on Palestine. And I went and I looked into some of what's coming out on the ecological front, stories about Gaza. And the Guardian has a piece where they say half the tree crop, basically half of all agricultural land has been destroyed. And there's Grist has a piece, environmental magazine has a piece from 2 months ago saying there's a whole push to have ecocide added to the 4 categories of war crimes that are recognized by the International Criminal Court, in light of the Gaza, just how horrible the ecological destruction is in Gaza. But despite this, the Israel lobby groups, the genocide groups, continue to be on the offensive. There's a whole effort to defund the Edmonton Pride Center because they express some support for Palestinians. There's a suit against Toronto Metropolitan University claiming their anti-Semitism on campus. We're seeing all this stuff about the Keffiyeh, right? And this effort of criminalizing the traditional Palestinian headdress. And the one that's got the most attention, of course, is the Ontario legislature move of banning the Keffiyeh. And the Speaker of the legislature went at Sarah Jama for wearing it, and I believe she was actually kicked out of the legislature. And this is all really odious, but this is all playing out. There's this clip on Twitter I just saw about like this person in a park. So somebody's got a Keffiyeh on in a park, somewhere in the Toronto area, I believe. And someone just goes into a fit and loses it. And I did a piece that was published, I think on Saturday, about this whole effort to just erase Palestinian cultural, historic, the Nakba, talking about the Nakba, the Keffiyeh, the poet, the Toronto School Board poet. And I quote, there's all these examples of the Keffiyeh, just all kinds of examples where people on like even that I forget her name, the doctor in Ottawa frames herself as a progressive, saying that the Keffiyeh is just this dangerous thing for Jews, and how dare a trust. She's on the Ottawa School District Board. She's a trustee, and another trustee wore the Keffiyeh, and is basically saying it's dangerous for Jews because of that. The National Post had this front page piece titled "QP Boss Wore Keffiyeh at Meeting," and a public sector worker in Toronto, the local president, wore a Keffiyeh in some Zoom union meeting, and the Globe or the National Post quotes these members of the local, like saying, "This is horrible. I can't believe they wear a Keffiyeh. This is I feel threatened, whatever kind of thing." So there's this whole this bid to erase Palestinians that is remarkable. I mean, they're physically being erased, of course, in Gaza, and then the cultural, historical efforts, and this is all or a lot of this is mobilized by people basically saying that as a Jewish person, I'm threatened by. As a Jewish person, the history of the Palestinian, the Nakba. This is happening, 8,000 kilometers away, right? And so a lot of Canadian Jews, they express their or a big part of their public expression of their religious and ethnic identity in recent months is effectively about like erasing Palestinians. Pretty stunning thing to see. Now, the National Post had this piece about the Keffiyeh, and the National Post is just like off the charts this week. I mean, the level of propaganda. I mean, it is out of control, and so Tuesday and Wednesday, the front page, I think there's 4 or 5 articles on Tuesday that are all about like the hatred at the demonstrations against genocide. And then the next date is a little bit less. Basically, the whole front page on Tuesday, the one article right at the bottom, the front page is not all about Israel, Gaza, and then the next day it's 3, I think, maybe it was 4, not quite as extreme. And every single day on the front page, right? These like screeds every single day, all week long. And it's just like as they're finding these mass graves, right? They're like the in Khan Yunis, not the Al Shifa, the previous hospital, but the new whole mass graves of the hospital, Khan Yunis. Now I think there's 300 and some odd bodies that are confirmed. I think there's still bodies that are not dug up, and then the propaganda just goes up, right? It just rises. And then there's also, of course, the student protests in the U.S. So I'll get to that all in a second. And it's just like the propaganda and the demonization of that just rises. It makes you wonder, like how one-to-one, like at a macro level, obviously the National Post just publishing all this, like these attacks and stuff, it's designed to divert from the reality on the ground, right? It's designed to divert from, the killings, the mass graves, etc. So that's at a macro level, but how does that play out at the micro level, right? Like, is the editor or these editors that conscious of like, oh wow, we're hearing these reports of mass graves, let's just amp up how much of the front page is devoted to like criticizing the hate at the rally in Ottawa or whatever, right? Like how one-to-one is that? It feels like when you read it, it does feel one-to-one, right? It feels like they know what's actually going on, and so let's just ramp up the propaganda. But I have a hard time believing them, being that cynical, that these people are that cynical, that that's actually how it's playing out. I don't know, but it's pretty wild to see. At this point, I don't think there's that many lefties reading the National Post certainly in a physical form, probably an article here and there, but I still do read it religiously every day of the week, and it's just it's amazing to see. And I have to say, I think I may have said this before, but one of the things that I've always thought about the National Post is actually quite good. It's quite a lot of international coverage. So it seems disproportionately international focused, which I think is because the being like crazy right wing and whatever is easier in international affairs, because like on domestic issues where they can go crazy about the minimum wage, but people basically have a sense of the minimum wage. People have their views, and it's hard to really terrorize people into believing minimum wage is a terrible thing or increasing minimum wage, right? But when it comes to international affairs, it's just like the ability to flip the world upside down is just it's just that much easier to do. And so I think at a macro level, the right wing kind of media outlet it's even easier, it's preferable to cover international affairs extensively, because that's where it's just sort of easy to be just like wild, insane, crazy, divorced from reality kind of sort of propaganda. And so it's not just about Palestine. National Post has a unique and especially crazy dimension when it comes to Israel and Palestine, but it's across the board on international affairs. Now, I was pointed out by David Miviser. He raised this to a number of people about this long, kind of complicated story that I won't get into, but basically this delegation came across this delegation to Israel from a Toronto school, and it came from Tannenbaum Chat, which is the largest private school in the country, a Jewish high school in Toronto. And they apparently sent this delegation about 6-7 weeks ago to Israel with 36 students. And they, according to their own stuff that they publish, I've paid attention to Tannenbaum Chat, but I hadn't looked at any of their stuff 6 months, 8 months, certainly since before the current Holocaust in Gaza. And they sent 36 students on what they call the Solidarity Mission to Israel. They announced that they themselves, this is all coming from the school. I have no inside information and no able to find any, critical information. It's their stuff. They had a barbecue for Israeli soldiers on a military base. They met with the Israeli president, Herzog. The president said this was the first delegation of students since the mass slaughter 6 months ago. And then I just went and I started looking through Tannenbaum Chat's Facebook, and it's just unbelievable. So on December 4th, when there was the big CIJA organized rally in Ottawa, pro-genocide rally, according to the Tannenbaum Chat, they sent 15 buses of students, and they said almost 700 students. They sent almost 700 students to Ottawa to rally in favor of genocide. That's, I think, actually totally fine. I don't even know how that plays out logistically. So like this, because Toronto to Ottawa, you're at least a 5-hour drive, right? So you got to probably, to get there for like a noon demo, you probably have to like leave at 6 a.m. So you got to start a couple hours before school. You probably wouldn't leave Ottawa until at least, I don't know, 2 o'clock. You're probably not coming back until 7 or 8 o'clock at night. So they're, dropping off a couple hours early, picking up multiple hours late than the normal school day. And then like the 700 numbers, like, I think I saw somewhere that it was like 1,200 students at the school. I think that number is in my head. I don't know if that's not, I don't say that reliably, but it's like, like, so who didn't go? So I assume there's a few students that didn't go I hope there were some that didn't go for like political reasons, but I presume most of the kids that didn't go is because, they had a hockey game, or they had a piano lesson, or they had dentist later, or whatever, right? That's something they had to do that day or later that day that they, in the evening they couldn't move aside. But then it also gets into the whole like no wonder they had the rally in Ottawa on a weekday, right? So if there was that many students coming from one school in Toronto, that means all the Jewish private schools in Montreal probably sent buses. And so that's why they actually had it during the week, right? Not on a weekend, is because they have like a forced audience, right? Of, they captured presumably like a couple thousand students from different Jewish schools, probably also in Ottawa. And that's what, ensured that they had an okay size rally. Anyways, that's just, to me, it's just absolutely stunning that this is what school, I think this is important to know. This is a registered charity. This is and that it gets much of its money from other registered charities like the Jewish Federation of Toronto and others. So a lot of this money is the school is subsidized by taxpayers. But it's not just that. They say they sent 150 students to the November 15th demonstration in Washington, D.C., pro-Israel demonstration in Washington, D.C. There's 150 students that, and they just go through it, and it's just like they have different people, like all these pro-Israel things happening. And this is all I'm doing is looking through their Facebook, right? There's one thing, every grade 12 was given a copy of that. I think it's Noah Tisby, her book about Israel. This is like official propagandist of Israeli. I think she's a former Hollywood person, former actress. She just basically, I think she has an official kind of propagandist position with the Israeli government. All the grade 12s are given book, a free copy of her book, pro-Israel book. There's just a whole series of things. Israel, flags everywhere. Then when the students that go to Israel, they report back to the whole school. They have according to all the school comes together in the gym, and they report back. This is a state that just killed 15,000 children, and they're like, it's just crazy to see that this is where a Toronto, the biggest private school apparently in the whole country, Toronto school is at politically, and there's no response, right? I've never heard of a demonstration. They have IDF days. I've reported, I've been probably a year or more that I did a piece about Tannenbaum Chat, but they had IDF days, right, where they raise funds for Israeli military projects. They until we raised this in 2020 about illegal recruitment, they were pretty kind of openly inducing students to join the Israeli military. And now since then, they seem to have become, on social media at least, they've become more coy about talking about that. Since we wrote about it, and we did the whole effort to have the Attorney General look into Foreign Enlistment Act stuff. But they seem to basically try to push their students to join the Israeli military in contravention of the Foreign Enlistment Act. I think I'm going to play one of these videos that I did. I think I did this last Monday. I don't think I played it.
You condemn Israel's killing of 14,000 children? Minister Freeland, you condemn Israel's killing of 14,000 children. Excuse me, stop blocking. You condemn Israel's killing of 14,000 children. Minister Freeland, why are you just walking away? You condemn the killing. You call for a two-way.
So I did that one. Maybe I'll do this. Well, I don't know how much time. I had another one with the tourism minister where I challenged her. Again, asked her about the two-way arms embargo, like I asked Freeland, and I kind of cut off there. The most exciting thing, the resistance continues. I'm seeing images of big demonstrations, Calgary, demos in many cities across the country this weekend. There were a couple here, and they got some divisions going on between the two Palestine groups. So they seem to have one on Saturday and one on Sunday, different groups, which is unfortunate. But there was, I think, 500 or so at the Saturday one. I didn't go to the Sunday one, but what the one on Saturday did is it went to the encampment. So they marched to the McGill camp, which was set up, and became the first student camp in Canada. And they, started off with like maybe 20 tents or something like that. Now it's grown. I was there about 3 or 4 hours ago, and it's up to I think a solid 80 tents, and they have a big they fenced it all around, so they kind of can control access, which I think has mostly about avoiding sort of Zionist kind of infiltrators that are coming to cause trouble. Also, it's about I think making life a bit more difficult if the police try to come down hard. And there was one as a encampment started at UBC this morning. There's U of O. It's a little bit unclear what's going on there. They sort of announced one. The U of O and the U of T both put out statements sort of expecting encampments today, and saying that they were not allowed. The U of T has barricaded I don't know the campus well enough to know what space that is exactly, but they've barricaded I guess one of the areas where they were suspecting that students would try to do the encampment. So I don't know how much of impact that's had. Just watching Al Jazeera just before starting this, there's big arrests happening at Austin, University of Texas, Austin, I guess, and also apparently in Irvine, California, at the UC Irvine. It seemed pretty heavy actually at the Austin. They had somebody there going live with the arrests happening. And Columbia, they said they gave some deadline for 2:00, but apparently the students refused, and faculty are blocking it. They're not going to send the cops in, but they're going to suspend every student for the year or for a year for some amount of time. Any student that stays after 2 p.m., they've threatened suspension on. But so then the faculty came, I guess, to provide some layer. So the camp here in Montreal at McGill is 48 hours now. It's the cops were heavy on Saturday. There's not cops around. It would be a real mess for the cops to do it. I mean, I think obviously they can logistically take it down, but it's going to be a pretty nasty affair, and it's a great spot for videoing the cops attacking the camp. There's all these places up top that you can have a good view from, and then inside the library building, and it'd be impossible for the cops to suppress the sort of video of what they were doing. And the McGill administration probably wants to avoid, and also it's right off of Sherbrooke Street, great spot, right downtown. yet it actually doesn't even bother anything because there's nothing that actually goes on there. I used to play, it's kind of right next to a sort of what was a football pitch. But the football pitch is not even being used. So they can't even claim that they're actually disrupting like any activity. But it's gotten like the amount of media attention to this encampment is, after week 4 or 5, the dominant media in Montreal just ignored all the demonstrations, even though it was, multiple thousands and many of them. The camp in the past 48 hours has gotten probably more attention than all the demonstrations that have been organized in Montreal over the past 31 or whatever it is weeks. And quite a bit of them are actually fairly decent articles. Obviously they refer to genocide, they talk about divestment, talk about the universities. It does feel like a bit of a shift in the tone of coverage that that's coming out of this, both in the U.S. and here, and obviously it's in terms of internationalist mobilization, I can't think of anything in recent years that anything comparing to this level of commitment, putting people's bodies on line. It's now like over 1,000 people have been arrested in the U.S. already, and I'll leave it. I think I'll just leave it at that. And we got about 10 or 12 minutes for comments and questions. And I'll make Laura. I'll make her co-host. And if people have comments or questions, go ahead.
I have a question, Eve. I was just wondering, I was down at the encampment at UNC this week, and actually it was pretty good. We had about 1,000 people down there and made it onto Al Jazeera News. And I was also at Duke University at a rally. But I was thinking, I think what makes this different, I don't know if you see this in Canada and also historically in the US, is that when I look at the young people now who are organizing it and who are speaking, is I feel like they face a level of risk that we didn't in the past, like when we were all out protesting before the Iraq war, in that there's a dedicated group now that wants to wreck their lives, these very pro-Zionist ones, prevent them from getting jobs and expose them to their families. And I've seen that here with a Zionist woman taking close-up pictures of particularly the Jewish speakers. And I was just wondering, and also, schools suspending them, kicking them out of their housing, whether they'll graduate. I was wondering if you see that in Canada too, is the pro-Jewish forces going out saying we're going to wreck your life, prevent you from getting jobs,
I mean, that's something that's been unique to this issue for years, if not decades, right? The Canary Mission or whatever, where they literally, it's just a website designed to target students to make them so that people won't ever hire them, and they call them anti-Semites and this and that, and they list their name. And the point is that when any employer like punches someone's name into Google, that this comes up right away, and it's designed to just like, and if you want to you can get your name off of it if you apologize and you say how wrong I was to target the Jewish people by criticizing Israel's slaughter, and it's Orwellian kind of stuff. But this has been going on for a long time. And so, and there's, continues the whole thing about the UCLA and this is 5 or 6 years. I think it was Sheldon Adelson's money that was paying that. They have like trucks, right? Ad trucks driving around with names of like prominent pro-Palestine activists and saying, so-and-so is a anti-Semite, and just like goes around the neighborhood or around the university campus and stuff. And I heard a report about another campus a few days ago in the States. One of the people on Al Jazeera or whatever was mentioning that. So yeah, it is that element. I think another element to it that's interesting, like if you look at the Columbia stuff from 68 when they occupied I think it's 3 or 4 or 5 or something like that, different buildings or whatever. Like this is not, with the exception of that Humboldt in California, where they really fought and they did occupy a building, they fought the cops back. People may have seen that. This is the one with the guy with the big water bottle banging the cop over the head with the big, those like 20-liter water bottles, whatever. The part of the thing is the videoing, right? Like in 68, like you could be a student activist, you could go be part of the occupation, maybe like the most prominent people, like they you know, everyone recognized them, and you knew if cops wanted to pursue them after, they could pursue them, whatever. But now everything's on video now, right? So if you just like walk into, you know, some building that was occupied, whatever. So like what the actual, you know, the camp, they're only taking camps. They're taking, you know, generally pieces of the university campus that are basically unused. And I think so that the role of the element of risk that comes with the whole like videoing of everything is also an added dimension that's not yeah, like even Iraq War of 2003 or whatever, you know, the 90s Iraq War also, but it's only really in the last, I don't know, you know, 10 years or 15 years where the videoing, everyone's got the ability, you know, so there's just so much more video out there. But yeah, no doubt the risk is real. I think there's no doubt that at all the different levels, you know, students being thrown out of dorms, students not being able to continue their studies. You know, I was expelled from university, but that all worked out. But yeah, I think most of them hope to work out. But
Before we go to EFO, you know, there's something different about the way our chat is set up tonight, unless it's just my computer, but I can't save the chat. I like to save the chat and sometimes read it later, but there's something about the way it's set up. But anyway, just let you know. Okay, go ahead, EFO.
Oh, I can actually solve that problem.
Okay, how?
Zoom, in its infinite wisdom, has decided to move things around. So if you're on a computer, you look at the top right corner,
Yeah.
next to where the X is, there's 3 dots there, and that's where they hit it.
Oh, thank you.
You just click on that, and it will tell you what. By the way, I provide technical support for a living, so feel free to hit me.
Okay.
Mike, yes, the attack on freedoms, basic fundamental freedoms, is so blatant now. They're not even trying to hide it. I just heard, I don't know if you caught the thing on CBC radio about McGill University. They had an interview with some of the students, and they interviewed a student who was a Jewish student who was in solidarity with Palestine. And then they interviewed the MP from Montreal, who was claiming that no Jews would feel safe in the encampment. And then they asked them that, well, this Jewish person is feeling safe and is supporting this. And then you should just hear the nonsense that was coming out of them, that it was just propaganda, pure propaganda. And I don't think the media is calling them out on it enough. They're doing it a little bit, but not enough. And I'm not sure what it's gonna take to get them to actually do their job as media, to actually tell the truth and not just whatever the Zionists want to say. So I don't know what's going on.
You know, Housefather has come out, within hours of the encampment setting up, he tweeted out that basically the encampment should be shut down and it's the police responsible to shut it down. Then a few hours, like at 10:20, according to his Twitter, at 10:20 p.m. Saturday night, he then posted a video of him like making this appeal, this speech about how it needs to be shut down. And then early this morning, he tweeted out again, saying that McGill administration has admitted that there's the number of tents has tripled since Saturday, and they're saying that lots of them are non-McGill students, and claiming anti-Semitic incidents, and the videos of that was a whole. Anyways, that little bit that was kind of interesting, but yeah, just call and shut it down. So he's just like right away. And then B'nai B'rith, Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center, same thing. They're calling it for it to be shut down, and not just shut down, but like they're calling for state police violence to disband it. I think they're stupid. I think that's actually dumb from a strictly pro-Israel standpoint. I think clearly what the Colombia president did to bring the cops in, it was a big mistake. I was having a discussion with a friend, Scott Weinstein, at the encampment today, And he was like, yeah, it was clearly in hindsight, it was a mistake, but most of the time it works. And I agree with that. Most of the time, violent repression does actually work. And, sometimes it spurs the backlash that makes it a mistake. In this case, I think what happened at Columbia, that's clear, because I think that was what would happen at McGill. I think it would be a mistake for the McGill administration in this situation. There's a lot of reasons why. Better off just like let it sit there, let it figure out. But like the anti-house fathers in the world, they're emotional about this, right? They're not like, honestly, they're not thinking straight. In They have like this one line of like boom, 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 clamp, 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 clamp. It's like basically he's playing to the fact that he knows that McGill administration is highly oriented towards fundraising and sort of a corporate world and whatever. And there's a whole bunch of prominent pro-Israel donors to McGill. The new head, piece that I just submitted to Mondovis about this. The new chancellor McGill is the vice chair of Stephen Bronfman's Claridge investment firm, and so the that's what he's playing. I mean, that's been their tactic at McGill now for a decade, really, but aggressive in the last couple of years. But we've got to remember at McGill specifically, in November, students voted 78.7% in the biggest turnout by a large margin in undergraduate history for a very strong boycott resolution, right? 18 months before that, they were voted 71% for the Palestine resolution. Now, the B'nai B'rith then took the student union to court, and they've like been able to just like muck the whole thing up. But the will of the students is absolutely crystal clear at this point. There is absolutely the encampment has the democratic mandate. That is absolutely no doubt about that. And so they are playing. The administration has done the repressive thing. They've done it for years, a decade. Like I said, it's been all these different votes and get all the details over the last decade. But they've done the repressive thing, and it's helped. It's worked to a certain extent in bottling things up. But doing that next step up the ladder of like sending in the cops. The cops won't come in. They don't come in light. They don't come in sophisticated. They're going to come in. If they do the McGill camp, they're going to come in with 100, 200 cops. There'll be 100 people plus, maybe it's a couple hundred people, I don't know, at the encampment. But then you'll have people flooding. I mean, I might try it in the middle of the night, make it a bit difficult to flood, but it's a prime spot to get people to. It's very difficult for the cops to control the whole area. And it will be some pretty ugly scenes that would come out of that. And I'm guessing that it would just up the ante. But maybe it will work. But irrespective, I mean, I think that already the camp's been a success, and where that all goes. But yeah, no doubt the Zionists it's an openly fascist movement. They are a leading force of fascism in Canada. It's absolutely crystal clear. That Vong is his name, the independent MP in Toronto that's just gone this weird pro-Israel turn over the past 6 months. There's a piece on the Maple about that guy. On Twitter, he's just totally rabid. He has a piece just like basically it's like kick him out. That's a common thing on Twitter of just this totally racist, like deport them all. They're all.
I would love to see what the same MP's message was for the KKK guys in the trucker convoy in Ottawa, and if they had a similar sentiment.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, I think Housefather, interesting enough, would have been one who would have been critical, because that was sort of like critical of the Liberal government. But yeah, most of the really hard, a whole bunch of the hardliners on Twitter are like sort of convoy type activists or whatever. But it's clearly the mobilizers really. I hadn't seen. I mean, I'm sort of somewhat new to Twitter, but I feel like over the past 6 or 7 months, this sort of open kind of like racist deport them. It's all the Arabs or the Muslims or the foreigners that are wrecking our country and coming to these, that kind of angle. I haven't seen that. Just how the level of that is really intense. And people like that are more sort of like mainstream kind of like pro-Israel types are doing that. Like Warren Kinsella, right? He's multiculturalism has failed because people are protesting against genocide. I mean, this is insane. It's one of the best arguments I've heard for multiculturalism is that there are people protesting genocide. But that's that's where it's at.
You said you had a hard stop. Do you have time?
I should go. But
Okay,
quick, Laurel.
Laurel, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to let you know that the administration has issued an injunction against the McGill students, and they have until 2:00 tomorrow to get out.
Oh, really? They did an injunction. I heard there was going to be some lawyer was going to court tomorrow to do the injunction, but so it's actually an injunction has been.
I think that's right. I read it on a blog that's connected, and the kids are saying that they are not going to move until the university divests.
Yeah, well, that probably it's going to be a big demonstration at McGill tomorrow at 2:00 or thereabouts.
Yep.
Have a nice evening, everyone. Same place, same time next week. Take care.